Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As always, I'm your festival host, Bruce Quek, and I'm here to introduce the last performance for tonight by myself, Bruce Quek. All just in time. Just in time. Despite its simple, readily agreed upon meaning, it can be quite a malleable phrase, which is part of why it's the festival theme for this year. We all know the phrase, we all know what it means, something that has been accomplished precisely when it was needed, or at the last possible moment when it was possible to do something. Things like getting to the bus stop in time, or the familiar flow of story in which the hero, they always stop the villain at the last possible moment when everything's at its worst. By the barest possible margins. We can also look at the phenomenon of just-in-time logistics, which works as long as it works, until it doesn't, as we've all lately experienced. Stretching the phrase a little further, we could have the idea of justice within time, of temporal justice. For instance, weighing the interests of unborn generations relative to our own, which is an important thing to think about in articulating responses to, say, the climate crisis. Although it's very strange to think of someone deploying the phrase in that way. By adopting climate policy so-and-so, we will be just in time. We could also use it to describe something that is just in time. That is to say, its principal characteristic is that it exists in time. Obviously, this is not a particularly useful category, since practically everything exists in time. There are some exceptions. Photons, the components of light, do not experience time. If we were to somehow adopt the point of view of a photon, time would simply not exist. No matter how many trillions of kilometers we traverse at the speed of light, nothing. At the smallest scale of the universe, odd things tend to happen. In 1940, the theoretical physicist John Wheeler came up with a novel postulate as a possible explanation for why every electron in the universe appears identical to one another. What if they were all the same single electron? How then would we account for a universe which teems with electrons, 10 to the power of 80 of them? Well, that one electron could travel backwards and forwards in time over and over, interacting with itself over and over and over an impossibly vast number of times. While this is unlikely to be true, the fact that it is on some theoretical level plausible does touch on the idea that the scientific understanding of time is a bit stranger than the sort of commonsensical understanding of time born of our own intuitive experience of it. I'm just going to go into it because even though we all know what it is. In this scheme of things, there is the universe, which contains matter and energy, within which one can move more or less freely in 3 spatial dimensions. This whole assemblage moves forward in time, as if fixed on rails, governed by an all-pervading universal clock, ticking forward at 1 second per second. Independent, absolute, and removed. A grand and invariant stage on which reality plays out. Now, it is thought that rather than being independent, space and time are inseparable in the form of space-time. Gone too is the aloof absoluteness of time. As Einstein found, all motion is relative. This permits all manner of strangeness. You've probably heard of the twin paradox. Put one on a spaceship very fast, let it go into wherever, leave another twin on the planet Earth, and at the conclusion of the spaceship twin's journey, the 2 twins will be of different ages. The movie Interstellar also dramatically depicts time dilation in the gravity well of a black hole, and evokes the possibility of wormholes, time travel, causal loops. Spoilers. The event that starts the whole movie going is the protagonist sending a message from himself in the future. It is in all these senses that I wish to describe something, or indeed someone, or someones. They are just in time in all these senses, and perhaps others yet unknown, because their name is just in time. Like Wheeler's peripatetic lone electron, so vastly traveled in space-time as if interacted with itself in so complex a fashion as to have helped constitute a good portion of the known universe. Just in time may have taken, and may yet take, a great many guises. As Douglas Adams quipped, time is relative, lunchtime doubly so. For just in time, it's just in time. There is a sense of eternality in just in time, being just in time. For the first phase of just in time, we could have Albert Einstein, who upended the serenity of the heavens. Now, through biological happenstance, as well as language, writing, and other forms of social interaction and organization, ours is a species that's able to communicate across generations, to build atop millennia of knowledge and experience and carry out plans that extend beyond a single lifespan. Yet it is in this very human capacity that society is sometimes so paradoxically deficient. Take, for instance, as I mentioned earlier, just-in-time logistics, first formulated by Toyota engineer Shigeo Shingo in the 1970s. The Toyota way, as they called it, aimed to eliminate the 7 wastes, the most pertinent here being the waste of having and storing superfluous raw material. One only orders as much material as one needs, doing away with the cost of owning warehouses and the wages of people who work in those warehouses. In time, variations on this approach would come to pervade the economic system of the world as a whole, cutting as much fat as possible to increase shareholder profitability. If something's out of stock in a shop, then you ask, is there more in the back? Usually there is no back to check at all. This is a vast network of elegant supply chains that overlays the world, a confection of spun sugar precisely calibrated for greater profit. Everything moving exactly as it needs to at exactly the right time. It works as long as it works, and so it works because everything flows as you want, and so it flows as you wish. What happens if it breaks? Usually the answer is, don't worry about it. And then it did break. The system is perturbed, and those delicate traceries begin to seize. Butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and months later, semiconductor shortages ravage whole industries. We saw this dramatically throughout the COVID pandemic, and now again with the war in Ukraine. Disruptions in shipments of grain and fertilizer, resounding globally in the form of increased food prices. And then for a while there, we couldn't even get fresh chicken from Malaysia. In 2021, the Ever Given had a little oopsie in the Suez Canal for a week, throttling global trade to the tune of billions. Immortalized as it was in internet memes, the Ever Given may be just in time. There is a less farcical side to our systemic incapacity to plan long term. After decades of growing acknowledgement of climate change as an existential threat, the world as a whole continues to barrel headlong into an ever-worsening climate crisis. Accords, treaties, and agreements are signed, and predictably we've busted through our emissions reduction targets with all the wild abandon of someone whose last words are, hold my beer. Now watch this. The structure of most of human society demands profit for the few in the here and now, and the consequences can go to hell. Even when we do manage to come up with long-term contingencies, they always seem to be too little too late, at the risk of being entirely overtaken by the sheer velocity of the crisis. Consider the Svalbard Global Sea Vault. It's a facility on an island deep in the Arctic Circle, which serves as a long-term gene bank for vital food crops, a backstop in the event of catastrophic loss of crop diversity. It is, from what I've read, meant to perform this function for 1,000 years. In 2016, 8 years after it opened, heavy rains and unusually warm temperatures resulted in the intrusion of water into the facility. No seeds were lost, but the fact that a 1,000-year vault needs upgrading 8 years into operation, that's casts a pall over its long-term prospects. In a similar vein, you may have heard of the proposal for in America, the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository. The proposal, I believe it was first tabled in like 1987, was meant to house the leavings of atomic energy until such time as it no longer poses a hazard to life, approximately 1 million years. This relatively staggering timescale poses a unique question. How do you keep people away from hazardous waste over a span of time longer than civilization has existed? Would these far distant inhabitants of the planet, assuming any remain, be recognizably human to us? Would any language now spoken be intelligible to them? A report by Zambia National Laboratories in 1993 suggested a number of possibilities. The creation of a forbidding, menacing landscape at the site of nuclear waste repositories, with looming, spiky earthworks, rendering the site uninhabitable and unfarmable. There would be pictograms of the dangers within, and a message translated into many languages, with a suggested wording that begins, "This place is a message and part of the system of messages. Pay attention to it." Sending this message was important to us. We considered ourselves to be a powerful culture. This place is not a place of honor. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing valued is here. Now, if you've ever played like a role-playing game or something, this is exactly the sort of thing to get treasure hunters excited. It happened with the pyramids. They had all those curses, all that forbidding architecture, and everyone was like, "Hey, check this out." At present, the United States remains without a permanent nuclear waste repository. In Finland, the world's first such facility is expected to begin operation this year. Once it is full, they have elected to deal with the issue of signaling that danger by removing any trace of the facility on the surface. No markers, no structures, no messages. Erased in space. Perhaps, too, the Onkalo spent nuclear field repository is just in time. There is an overweening technological solutionism in these projects of long-term planning. Against the vastness of time, we must build edifices to master it. To vast trunkless lakes of stone in the sand, blah, 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 blah. Climate change, mass extinctions, don't worry, innovation or something. It's almost as if we're sort of hoping that a wizard will turn up to fix things. What has become of our far-seeing innovators, our titans of industry, who pay their PR firms very well to convince us that their geniuses will save the world? Billionaire PayPal founder Peter Thiel is on a quest to become an immortal vampire. Elon Musk sees in himself a genetic god king ruling over indentured Martian labor. And Jeff Bezos dreams of off-worlding heavy industry and the people operating that heavy industry into orbital habitats. Others of their ilk draw up plans for bunkers to ride out the apocalypse, with their staff fitted for bomb collars. Meanwhile, the so-called long-termists tilt at phantasms like Rocco's basilisk, or shape language to sanitize the idea of eugenics. In their technological solutionism, there is a kind of fatalism. The world is the way it is because it must be the way that it is. In 1992, Francis Fukuyama hailed the end of history. Many, it seems, remain resolute in this belief. And if there is a threat to the way of doing things, it can only be surpassed by the doings of a transcendent genius, a superman. In such a figure, I think, we might find the opposite counterpart of just in time. There is a very human tendency to imagine the future as very much like the present, but with a twist. Funny hats, togas, that sort of thing. In 1900, in France, a series of illustrations were produced to imagine the year 2000. It looks a lot like 1900, except everything's flying and a few more machines. And for some reason, they're also riding giant seahorses and playing underwater croquet. I don't know what that's about. The 60s gave us the Jetsons, the cartoon. It's just America in the 60s, but there are robots and everything has a little antenna on it. This extends backwards as well. As the song by Wilco puts it, every generation thinks it's the last. Myth is replete with apocalypses to come, apocalypses that already have been, cyclical conceptions thereof, and more. History has no shortage of doomsayers that claim to have reckoned when everything will end. What differs now is that we have a material basis to analyze present and impending conditions. There is a story of endings that I would like to close out with. In Philip K. Dick's novel Valis, the protagonist, horse lover of fact, is struck by a pink laser fired from a mysterious intelligent satellite. Among the secrets vouchsafed to him by this pink light is a particular understanding concerning the arc of history and the passage of time. The empire never ended. This is a line which recurs throughout the text, always in full, all bold emphasis, a maddening refrain. The empire never ended. Which empire? And what end was it that should have been but never was? And could this end be somehow accomplished, correcting the presumptive aberration of unending imperial dominion? And as to the first of these questions, fact refers specifically to the Roman Empire, some years after the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. What did it mean to claim, in California, 1974, that the Roman Empire had not ended? This is in plain contradiction of our conventional understanding of time and of history. The sheer volume of historical information recorded between then and now is vast, and the broad consensus is that the empire did end. Certainly there are few enough people alive today who speak of imperial Rome as a living reality. Perhaps by identifying the end of the empire, we could begin to untease this. 476 is the year which looms large in the imagination, yet one could also justifiably point to other dates of expiry. There was the sack of the Eternal City in 410, when, as the contemporaneous observer St. Jerome of Stridon put it, the city which had taken the whole world was itself taken. There was also in 1453, when Constantinople fell, formally extinguishing the eastern remnant of the Roman Empire as a whole. As storytellers took to the symmetry of old Rome rising and falling under rulers named Romulus, so began and ended the Second Rome. The story is told of the last day of Constantine and his empire. Knowing that his cause was lost, he is said to have discarded his imperial regalia and disappeared into the fighting, never to be seen again. He may have died by the sword, or fled into obscure exile. Another story has it that he abides, obscured and outside time, as the marble emperor who will one day return. Perhaps Constantine XI was just in time. At various points in these 1,000 intervening years, there are other falls, marking the transition of imperial Rome to something else. Material changes in resources and organization, changes in bureaucratic and administrative structures, cultural, linguistic, and demographic shifts. The fall of Rome. It sounds like a singular event, a point around which the whole world turns, as one would hear it told in a story. On closer inspection, the end possesses something of fractal complexity. It is at once a single year that lasted 1,000, and 1,000 years compressed as one. An event that echoes within itself, even as it reverberates without. It has continued to echo for centuries, as can be seen in the various claims of succession to the empire, in the form of Third Romes, New Romes, and other national projects modeling themselves in the Roman form. Its ripples include the longevity of its cultural influence, the title Caesar, the Roman Catholic Church, the Latin script, and so on. In these echoes, the empire persists. But now, even now, but the substance of horse-leather fat's insistent refrain, the empire never ended, is not captured in these echoes. As horse-leather fat perceived it, the 1st and 20th centuries are somehow one and the same, with the intervening millennia being false time. That is, in a fairly literal sense, these far distant points in time were not far distant at all, but superimposed. As he recounts in the novel, the empire never ended, Fat quoted to himself. That one sentence appeared over and over again in his exegesis. It had become his tagline. Originally, the sentence had been revealed to him in a great dream. In the dream, he was again a child, searching dusty used bookstores for rare old science fiction magazines, in particular Astoundings. In the dream, he had looked through countless tattered issues, stacks upon stacks, for the priceless serial entitled The Empire Never Ended. If he could find it and read it, he would know everything. And that had been the burden of the dream. Prior to that, during the interval in which he had experienced a two-world superimposition, he had seen not only California, USA, of the year 1974, but also ancient Rome. He had discerned within the superimposition a gestalt shared by both space-time continua, a common element, a black iron prison. This is what the dream referred to as the empire. He knew it because, upon seeing the black iron prison, He had recognized it. Everyone dwelt in it without realizing it. The black iron prison was their world. Or, as Fat later states to a mental health professional in the novel, time does not exist. This is the great secret known to Apollonius of Tyana, Paul of Tarsus, Simon Magus, Paracelsus, Boehmer, and Bruno. The universe is contracting into a unitary entity which is completing itself. Decay and disorder are seen by us in reverse as increasing. Entry number 8 of my exegesis reads, real time ceased in 70 CE with the fall of the temple at Jerusalem. It began again in 1974. The intervening period was a perfect, spurious interpolation aping the creation of the mind. As Fat saw it, the empire, or the black iron prison, was a supra or trans-temporal constant. Within the subjective experience of time, the black iron prison always looms, whether in millennia past, the perceived present, or speculated futures. In this derangement of time, it is not only the empire that is superimposed, but the whole world that it dominated. Within this temporal superimposition is one of Horst Fat himself in the 1st century, called Thomas, one of the very earliest Christians struggling under the Roman yoke in the immediate wake of the departure of their Messiah. In this superimposition, Fat realizes the impossible task set before him. The destruction of the black iron prison and the ending of the eternal empire at once in the 20th century and the 1st century, and at innumerable points, past and future, that were and are at once a single point in time. Spoilers for Valis here. Horst Fat is the K-Dick himself. And we can add just in time to that list of names. Where the line is drawn between his literary imagination and his own sincere belief is not entirely clear, but Valis is at least partly autobiographical. In 1977, he delivered a speech titled, "If you find this world bad, you should see some of the others," at a science fiction festival in France, which outlines in greater detail his theories and beliefs on the nature of time on which the novel is based. There's also his exegesis, but it's easier to read the speech. They may be the product of a deep and transcendent insight into reality, or they may be the result of mental illness, precisely which can never be entirely certain, because we, too, are just in time. Thank you.